Love is frequently hailed as an unbreakable bond, a powerful force capable of overcoming any obstacle. But what occurs when that love is rooted in deception and hidden truths? In this narrative, a wedding ring, intended to signify the beginning of a shared life, transforms into a harrowing saga of treachery and violence. Set in a serene, affluent neighborhood, this tragic story unravels behind the facade of what was meant to be a flawless wedding, where happiness and excitement conceal the dark secrets poised to emerge. In the picturesque town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and serene lakes, a palpable excitement filled the air. The sun cast golden rays on the charming streets, where white picket fences and blooming gardens painted a scene of idyllic suburban life. It was here that a wedding was set to take place, a union that promised to be a celebration of love and commitment. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect day, dark currents of betrayal and unspoken truths were already beginning to swirl. The bride, Clara, stood in front of the mirror, her heart racing with anticipation. She was a vision of beauty in her elegant white gown, the delicate lace and satin hugging her figure in all the right places. Her long, flowing hair cascaded down her back, adorned with small pearls that glimmered like stars. Yet beneath her radiant smile lay an undercurrent of unease. Clara had always envisioned this day as the pinnacle of her happiness, a culmination of dreams and hopes. But in her heart, a nagging feeling whispered that something was amiss. Her fiancé, Nathan, was a devoted man, known for his kindness and unwavering loyalty. He had swept Clara off her feet with grand gestures and heartfelt promises. They had shared countless moments of laughter, joy, and intimacy, building a bond that seemed unbreakable. Yet as the wedding day drew near, Clara sensed a growing distance between them. Nathan's laughter no longer resonated with the same warmth, and his eyes, once so vibrant, appeared clouded with thoughts he dared not share. It was during these moments of introspection that Clara's mind often drifted to Marcus, Nathan's best friend. Marcus was charming and charismatic, with a quick wit that could light up a room. He had been a constant presence in Nathan's life, a confidant and ally. However, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper lying beneath the surface of their friendship, a connection that felt almost electric whenever they were all together. Their shared glances and subtle touches hinted at a bond that transcended mere friendship, but Clara pushed those thoughts aside, unwilling to entertain the notion of betrayal on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. As the day unfolded, the wedding venue, a grand estate with manicured gardens and a sprawling ballroom, was abuzz with activity. Guests arrived, dressed in their finest attire, adorned with smiles and laughter that masked the tension brewing behind the scenes. Clara's family and friends flitted about, ensuring every detail was perfect, from the floral arrangements to the carefully curated playlist that would accompany their first dance. Yet amidst the joyful chaos, Clara felt a growing sense of dread tightening around her chest, a premonition of the storm that was about to break. In the shadows, Nathan and Marcus exchanged knowing glances, their camaraderie tinged with an unspoken tension. Nathan, standing at the altar, felt a whirlwind of emotions raging within him. He was at a crossroads, torn between the life he was about to commit to with Clara and the deep connection he shared with Marcus. Every moment spent with Marcus sparked a fire in his heart, a love so profound that it threatened to unravel the very fabric of his existence. As Clara took her place at the altar, her heart swelling with love for Nathan, she remained blissfully unaware of the turmoil that surrounded her. The vows exchanged that day were meant to symbolize a new beginning, a promise of eternal love and devotion. Yet the weight of hidden desires loomed large, casting a shadow over the ceremony that would soon unfold. The wedding ceremony commenced with an air of festivity, but beneath the surface, a tempest brewed. Clara walked down the aisle, her heart racing as she locked eyes with Nathan. He smiled, but the warmth of that smile felt distant, as though it was a mask concealing deeper fears. The guests rose in unison, their faces illuminated with joy, but Clara's gaze kept drifting to Marcus, who stood nearby as Nathan's best man. She noticed the way he shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of concern shadowing his features. As the officiant began to speak, Clara's mind wandered back to the moments leading up to this day. She remembered the excitement of their engagement, the romantic dinners, the laughter shared with friends. Yet memories of secretive conversations between Nathan and Marcus nagged at her thoughts. They had always been close, but lately, There had been an intensity in their interactions that stirred an uncomfortable feeling in Clara's gut. Nathan recited his vows with a voice that wavered ever so slightly, betraying the internal conflict raging within him. Each word felt hollow, a script he had rehearsed countless times, but now felt foreign. He glanced at Marcus, whose expression mirrored the turmoil in his own heart. Their connection had deepened into something that transcended friendship, a secret that threatened to surface at any moment. The weight of their love hung heavily in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the choices they had made. As Clara placed her hand in Nathan's, she felt a rush of warmth, but it was quickly overshadowed by the unease that clung to her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the joy of this day was somehow tainted. The ceremony continued, and as they exchanged rings, Clara felt a pang of doubt. The beautiful band that adorned her finger was meant to represent unity, but all she could think of was the hidden fracture that ran through their relationship. The reception that followed was filled with laughter and dancing, but Nathan's heart was heavy with guilt. Clara radiated happiness, her laughter echoing throughout the room, but Nathan felt like a ghost, drifting through the celebration with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Every time he looked at Clara, he was reminded of the life he had just committed to, a life that felt increasingly suffocating as he grappled with the truth he had yet to confront. In the shadows of the ballroom, Marcus observed the couple, his heart aching for the love they shared. He had always been there for Nathan, a source of strength and support, but now he felt like a bystander in a tragedy unfolding before his eyes. The connection he shared with Nathan was undeniable, yet he knew that their love was a secret that could shatter everything if revealed. The weight of their hidden relationship became a burden he could no longer bear. As the night wore on, Clara noticed the fleeting glances exchanged between Nathan and Marcus, a silent language that spoke volumes. She tried to brush off her growing suspicion, convincing herself that it was merely her imagination. But every time Nathan's gaze lingered on Marcus, her heart clenched with fear. The intimacy of their friendship felt like a barrier she could never penetrate, a world that existed just out of reach. The dance floor was alive with energy, but Nathan felt increasingly disconnected. He moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and forced smiles. Clara twirled in her gown, lost in the euphoria of the moment, while Nathan's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. He knew that the vows he had just exchanged would change everything, and the reality of his relationship with Marcus felt like a ticking time bomb. Amidst the revelry, the two men shared a brief moment alone, their eyes locking in a silent plea for understanding. Nathan's heart ached as he realized that he was standing at a precipice, teetering between two worlds, one filled with the love and commitment Clara represented, and the other ignited by the passion he felt for Marcus. The conflict was unbearable, and with every passing moment, the weight of his secret grew heavier. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere shifted from joyous celebration to an undercurrent of tension that no one could quite place. Clara, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, continued to bask in the glow of her new marriage, but Nathan felt increasingly trapped in a web of lies. He watched as Clara danced with her friends, her laughter ringing like music in his ears, yet the sound felt hollow against the backdrop of his inner turmoil. Marcus, too, felt the weight of the evening pressing down on him. He had always cherished the bond he shared with Nathan, but tonight, that connection felt like a double-edged sword. Every smile he shared with Clara felt disingenuous, and every glance exchanged with Nathan was fraught with unspoken words. He longed to reach out, to bridge the growing chasm that separated them, but fear held him back. As the hour grew late and the guests began to disperse, Clara suggested they head to their bridal suite, eager to continue the celebration in private. Nathan's heart raced at the thought. The intimacy of their wedding night should have been a moment of pure joy, but instead it filled him with dread. He had just begun to confront the depth of his feelings for Marcus, and the thought of being alone with Clara felt insurmountable. Once inside the suite, Clara turned to Nathan, her eyes sparkling with love. She leaned in to kiss him, but Nathan found himself pulling away slightly, his heart pounding with guilt. Clara noticed the shift in his demeanor, her smile faltering as concern crept into her expression. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with tenderness. "Yeah, just tired from the day," Nathan replied, forcing a smile that felt strained. Clara accepted his explanation, but doubt lingered in her eyes. She had always prided herself on being attuned to Nathan's feelings, and the tension between them felt like a heavy fog that refused to lift. Meanwhile, Marcus sat alone in his own room, wrestling with his emotions. The events of the day had unfolded like a whirlwind, and he found himself longing for Nathan, the man who had come to mean so much to him. Their friendship had blossomed into something beautiful yet terrifying, and the reality of their situation weighed heavily on his heart. He knew that the connection they shared could no longer remain a secret, yet the thought of revealing it felt like stepping into an abyss. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Nathan felt a surge of desperation. He needed to talk to Marcus, to confront the feelings that had been simmering between them for so long. With each passing moment, the strength of his love for Marcus grew stronger, and he realized that pretending to be someone he was not was no longer an option. Unable to sleep, Nathan quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Clara. The hotel corridors were dimly lit, each step echoing in the silence as he made his way to Marcus's room. His heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. He needed to find clarity, to confront the truth that had been gnawing at him since the night of their first kiss. When Nathan finally knocked on Marcus's door, the wait felt agonizing. The door creaked open, revealing Marcus, whose expression mirrored the turmoil that plagued Nathan. "What are you doing here?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't stay away. We need to talk," Nathan replied, stepping inside as Marcus closed the door behind him. The air was thick with unspoken words, and both men knew that this conversation could change everything. They sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of their emotions palpable in the room. Nathan took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I care about Clara, but what we have, it's real. I can't ignore it anymore." Marcus's gaze fell to the floor, his heart aching. "I feel the same way, but what do we do? You just married her, Nathan. We can't just throw everything away." "I don't want to hurt her," Nathan replied, his voice breaking. "But I can't deny my feelings for you. It's tearing me apart." At that moment, the tension between them reached a boiling point. In a moment of weakness, fueled by desperation and longing, they succumbed to the desire that had been simmering beneath the surface. They kissed, a fierce and passionate embrace that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a release, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos of their emotions. As dawn approached, the air was thick with the aftermath of their encounter, a mixture of passion and guilt hanging heavily between them. Nathan pulled away, his heart racing as he faced the reality of what they had just done. The warmth of their connection was overshadowed by the chilling fear of the consequences that would inevitably follow. "I can't go back to Clara after this," Nathan whispered, the weight of his words sinking in. "What have we done?" Marcus looked at him, eyes filled with a mix of love and regret. "We can't pretend it didn't happen, but we have to think about Clara. She deserves the truth, even if it hurts." They sat in silence, the gravity of the situation pressing down on them. Nathan's mind raced with thoughts of Clara, her laughter, the vows they had exchanged. The love he felt for her was genuine, yet now it felt tainted by the truth he had hidden for far too long. Meanwhile, Clara lay awake in their bridal suite, a nagging feeling pulling at her heart. She turned to Nathan, who was still missing from her side, and panic set in. Where could he be at this hour? Her mind was filled with dark thoughts, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She slipped out of bed, pulling on a robe, and quietly left the room, her instincts guiding her toward Marcus's suite. As Clara approached Marcus's door, her heart raced. She hesitated, a knot forming in her stomach. The thought of barging in felt wrong, yet she needed to know the truth. Summoning her courage, she knocked softly, hoping to find Nathan safe and sound. When the door creaked open, Clara was met with a sight that shattered her world. Nathan stood inside, his face pale, and Marcus, still dressed in his underwear, looked equally as shocked. In that split second, the truth hit her like a freight train, and the ground beneath her feet felt as if it had crumbled away. "Clara!" Nathan exclaimed, his voice a mixture of surprise and dread. The atmosphere shifted from intimate to chaotic in an instant. Clara's mind raced, processing the betrayal that lay before her. "No, no, no, this can't be happening." Clara's voice trembled with disbelief, her heart pounding in her chest. The anger bubbled up inside her, fueled by betrayal and humiliation. She had trusted Nathan, and now it felt as if that trust had been shattered in a single moment. "Clara, let me explain," Nathan began, his voice pleading, but Clara couldn't bear to hear his words. The pain in her chest morphed into rage, and she lunged at him, the fury of her emotions blinding her. "You think you can explain this away? You've betrayed me in the worst way possible," Clara screamed, her voice echoing in the small room. Nathan stepped back, the weight of her accusation crashing down on him. Marcus stood frozen, torn between his love for Nathan and the guilt that consumed him. He had never imagined that their secret would lead to this moment, and now he felt helpless as Clara confronted Nathan with a fury he had never seen before. "Clara, please," Marcus finally managed to say, but his words fell flat against the tempest of emotions in the room. Clara's gaze shifted to him, and in that moment, she saw not just Nathan's best friend, but the man who had been complicit in the betrayal. "You," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You were supposed to be my friend. How could you do this to me?" In the chaos of emotions, Clara's mind raced, and before she could fully comprehend what she was doing, she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy decorative lamp, and swung it with all her strength. The room fell into stunned silence as the lamp connected with Nathan's head, the impact sending him crashing to the floor. Time seemed to freeze as Clara stood there, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The reality of her actions began to sink in, but the rage still coursed through her veins. She watched in horror as Nathan lay motionless, blood pooling around him, the lifelessness of his eyes haunting her. "No!" Marcus shouted, rushing to Nathan's side, his hands trembling as he tried to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. The damage was done. Clara's world crumbled around her as the weight of her actions settled in. In her grief and madness, Clara turned on Marcus, consumed by a desperate need to place blame. "This is your fault," she screamed, her anger morphing into despair. The chaos of the moment spiraled out of control, and in a blind rage, she lashed out again. Marcus barely had time to react as Clara's fury swept over him. The second blow struck him down, leaving him beside Nathan, their blood mingling on the cold, unforgiving floor. The room descended into silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that echoed the finality of the tragedy that had just unfolded. As dawn broke, the first light of day filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. The aftermath of the chaotic night lay heavy in the air, a suffocating silence enveloping the space that had once been filled with joy and celebration. Clara knelt on the cold floor beside the bodies of her husband, Nathan, and his best friend, Marcus, the reality of her actions crashing down upon her like a tidal wave. The horror of what she had done seeped into her bones, and her heart raced with a mix of grief and disbelief. She shook Nathan gently, her hands trembling, hoping against hope that he would awaken, that somehow this nightmare could be undone. "Wake up, please," she cried, her voice breaking as desperation clawed at her throat. But there was no response, only the cold, lifeless gaze of the man she had vowed to love and cherish. The man she had unintentionally condemned with a single, reckless act of rage. A sense of panic surged through her as she turned to Marcus, who lay still, his face twisted in shock and fear. "What have I done?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile remnants of her sanity. The room, once vibrant with hopes and dreams, now felt like a tomb, encapsulating the final moments of two lives intertwined by friendship and love. Clara's mind raced as she struggled to comprehend the weight of her actions. The lamp that had been the instrument of such devastation lay shattered beside her, a symbol of the violence that had erupted from her heart in a moment of overwhelming emotion. She had entered this night as a bride, filled with dreams of a new beginning, only to emerge as a murderer, haunted by the ghosts of her choices. Frenzied and panicked, she stumbled to her feet and began to pace the room, her thoughts spiraling into chaos. She grasped at straws, searching for a way to undo the damage, to restore the lives that had been irrevocably altered. The blood, dark and congealed, smeared across the floor like ink on a page, told a story of betrayal and loss. With every frantic scrub, she felt the futility of her efforts wash over her, the realization sinking in that no amount of cleaning would erase the stains of her actions. "Get a grip, Clara," she admonished herself, clenching her fists as her vision blurred with tears. She needed to think clearly, to assess the situation without letting fear dictate her next move. The weight of the truth pressed heavily on her chest, and she was acutely aware that the world beyond her hotel room was still turning, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Fighting against the tide of despair, she considered her options. Should she flee, leaving everything behind in search of a fresh start? Or should she surrender to the consequences of her actions and face whatever awaited her? The thought of escaping felt intoxicating, a fleeting fantasy that offered a glimmer of hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. But deep down, she knew that running would not absolve her of the guilt that would follow her like a shadow, nor could it erase the memories of the night that had changed everything. As she stood there, the cool air of the room felt suffocating, and she was struck by the irony of it all. Just hours ago, she had been surrounded by laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of love. Now she was enveloped in a chilling silence, the echoes of her decisions reverberating around her. The walls that had once echoed with vows of love now bore witness to the tragic conclusion of a story that had begun with such promise. Clara sank to the floor, her body collapsing under the weight of grief. She buried her head in her hands, the sobs racking her frame as she tried to process the enormity of what had transpired. She thought of Nathan, of the life they had planned together, the future they had envisioned. The dreams they had shared were now nothing more than ashes, swept away by the winds of fate. In that moment of vulnerability, the reality of her isolation engulfed her. She had lost not only the man she loved, but also the friendship that had existed between Nathan and Marcus, a bond that had been forged through years of shared experiences, laughter, and unspoken understanding. Now, all that remained were the remnants of a life shattered beyond recognition. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, jolting her from her despair. Her heart raced as she thought of the consequences of her actions. What would she say if someone entered the room? How could she explain the chaos, the blood, the bodies? Panic surged anew, and she scrambled to her feet, instinctively searching for a way to hide the evidence of her crime. But as she turned, she saw the door creak open, and her breath caught in her throat. A figure appeared in the doorway, a hotel staff member, drawn by the muffled sounds of distress. Their eyes widened in horror as they took in the scene before them, and Clara felt a rush of emotions flood through her: fear, shame, and an overwhelming sense of impending doom. "What happened?" the staff member gasped, their voice trembling as they stepped into the room, taking in the blood-soaked floor and the two lifeless bodies. It was as if time had frozen, the air thick with tension as reality crashed down upon them both. Clara's mind raced. I didn't mean to. It was an accident," she stammered, but the words felt hollow, inadequate to capture the gravity of the situation. She realized that no explanation could justify the violence that had erupted in that room, the lives that had been irrevocably altered by her actions. The staff member, still in shock, reached for their phone, trembling hands dialing emergency services. "I need to call for help," they said, their voice shaky as they attempted to regain composure. But in that moment, Clara felt a growing sense of dread. Help would not come fast enough to save her from the consequences that loomed over her like a dark cloud. As sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the approach of law enforcement, Clara's thoughts spiraled further into chaos. She was acutely aware that the life she had known was slipping away, and a new, terrifying reality awaited her. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, leaving her breathless and trembling with anticipation of the unknown. She turned to the staff member, her voice trembling. "Please, you have to understand. It was a moment of rage, a mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But her pleas fell on deaf ears as the reality of her situation began to settle in. In the moments that followed, Clara felt as if she were watching her life unfold from a distance, a spectator in her own tragedy. The shadows of her choices loomed large, and she could not escape the inevitable truth. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The consequences of her actions would ripple through the lives of everyone connected to her, leaving scars that would never heal. As the police arrived and began to assess the scene, Clara felt a profound sense of despair wash over her. She was no longer the bride who had walked down the aisle, filled with dreams of love and happiness. Instead, she was a woman caught in a web of her own making, facing the grim reality of a future that had been irrevocably altered by a single tragic moment. In the aftermath of the chaos, as the officers began to ask questions and gather evidence, Clara found herself grappling with a profound sense of regret. The realization that her life was forever changed sank in, an anchor weighing her down in a sea of sorrow. There would be no returning to the life she had known, no chance to reclaim the happiness that had been so cruelly snatched away. As she sat in the back of a police car, the reality of her situation settled heavily upon her. She gazed out the window, watching the world outside continue on, blissfully unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded just moments before. The sun rose higher in the sky, casting a golden light over the city. But for Clara, the dawn of a new day felt like the closing of a chapter filled with love, dreams, and the promise of a beautiful future that had been shattered in an instant. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, and she was left to confront the haunting question, what now? The answer remained elusive, lost in the echoes of a night that would forever haunt her. As the police car pulled away, the sirens fading into the distance, Clara understood that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges and heartache, but she had no choice but to face it, to confront the consequences of her actions and the reality of a life irrevocably changed. In the aftermath of a night filled with heartbreak, the echoes of their lives lingered, urging all who heard their story to reflect on the choices they make and the truths they hide. This tragic tale serves as a reminder of the fragility of love and the profound impact of our decisions, urging us to confront our true selves in a world that often demands we wear masks. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you found this story insightful, please subscribe and leave us a like. We would really appreciate that.